Hi there, hello. So I just want to be really brief and tell you about this other video that I'm asking you to watch this week. It's about the Methods Clinic. What is that? Well, first of all, I have to tell you about the Methods Cafe. So I think if you listen to the podcast with these two pioneers in the first module, you would have heard a lot about. You'd have heard a decent amount about how they met and how one of the first things they decided to do was create this Methods Cafe with several other people they worked with and were in the field with them, and at the Western Political Science Association meetings. And it's also migrated, and I just took part in one, at the American Political Science Association's annual meeting. But the idea is that in a Methods Cafe, at these annual meetings, and Western is usually about 6 months after the American, so it's kind of every 6 months. There are topics, and actually, I can tell you what this year's topics were. So I circled the ones that I went to. Funding interpretive research, publishing, IRBs and research ethics, political ethnography, field research in the context of COVID, positionality, reflexivity, and embodiment, teaching interpretive methods, intersectional interpretation and community engagement, indigenous interpretive methods, and Black women's interpretive approaches. So this year, it was all Zoom breakout rooms, and you could just go into whatever breakout room in this hour and a half period and ask a question of these people who are basically there to answer your questions, or at least give some address to your questions, and have a conversation about it. And this year, certainly there was in some of the more popular rooms, there were 6 or 7 people just asking questions of the 1 or 2 facilitators in every room. But during the real world Methods Cafe, the in-person, I should say, Methods Cafe, it was just a big room, and everybody was at a table, and they had a little sign that said, funding interpretive research, or field research, or political ethnography, or teaching, or publishing, and you could go and ask those questions. So Yano and Schwartz-Shea have been not shy about experimenting with the idea of talking about methods in a different format. The clinic is this idea that people need help during the pandemic in many different ways, right? And they are not doctors, or at least they're not that kind of doctor. And they said, okay, a clinic, maybe we can just give some help to people who are asking all these kinds of questions, and we can get a panel of experts to answer some of them. And without reading to you what all of them were, there are all these topics that starting in January of 2021, they would have basically a monthly giant Zoom meeting with everyone who wanted to come to these interpretive oriented methods clinics. And they just called them methods clinics. They didn't call them interpretive methods clinics. And it was open to anyone. And so it just so happens that most people who are geared towards interpretive methods would be the ones who would want to show up. So it was kind of an open call, and they came, and people came, and including me. I came to a couple of these methods clinics, and I believe that the one that I linked here, this methods clinic number 3 about ethnography, is one of the ones that I attended, and I think I even asked a question. But the point is with the methods clinics is that they assembled a few prominent researchers that in addition to these two were also on the Zoom call, and they would kind of give an overview. They would give a context to why they're talking about this issue, but then they would turn it over to this panel of experts who would take the lion's share of the questions. But the first question, and the kind of overarching question, is usually given by a graduate student who had kind of emailed in this initial question. And And what I liked about this one is that it was actually a graduate student who had completed some field work as an ethnographer, and she had come back and she just, throws up her hands and says, what do I do with all these field notes? And it's a surprisingly simple question, but the complexity of answers given is really amazing. And they talk for about, I want to say, 90 minutes, maybe it's less than that. About how to do ethnography in the context of COVID, and also in the context of mostly the context of COVID, but just in the various different contexts in which they're operating. And they had two very different kinds of researchers talking. One in India, I can't remember where the second person, David Forrest, I think he had something very different. But Natasha Bale was talking about gender in India, and both of them were very much in the political science vein. I believe David Forrest does law. I'm not quite sure. But it was a while ago, and it was really before the vaccine was available, right? And so there was a lot of wondering going on about what was going to happen in the world, and I can tell you that from the perspective of a long winter, it seemed like a kind of a bright spot that happened in January, that these two prominent authors are giving this methods clinic that was going to be a new monthly event, and you could attend over Zoom, and it could be you could have this kind of long conversation with 80 different people, but mostly very prominent researchers in the field who are just giving practical advice. So in all of those senses, it's great. So I'm just giving this introduction to what it is that they were doing, that they can probably do, that they did themselves during the clinic. But so before you click on the link, I hope you click on this link, watch, and now you can watch the rest and know what it is. But if you don't want to watch it, you don't really have to. I think you can do this work. You can do the questions this time around without having the methods clinic watched. But you should have at least watched my lectures and had some questions about it before then. Okay, thanks very much for watching, and hope you enjoy the methods clinic if you decide to watch it. Okay, take care.